I moved to a coastal town, thinking it was the escape I needed. Peace, quiet, no more city noise, no more rush, just the sound of waves and the freedom to think. It seemed perfect, a simple life by the sea. But that first day, something happened. Something I couldn't explain. I woke up in the middle of the afternoon, feeling like I had just fallen asleep. I stretched and walked out into the sun. But as soon as I stepped outside, everything changed. The air felt heavy, like the whole town was holding its breath. And then, without warning, it felt like the day turned into night. I checked my watch. It was still daylight, but the shadows stretched too long, the sky too dark. Something had shifted. I thought it was just a trick of the mind. Maybe the isolation was playing games with me. I decided to go down to the beach, to clear my head, but when I reached the shoreline, my heart stopped. There, standing in the water, was a figure. The kind of figure you know you shouldn't see. Not here, not now, not at all. I thought I imagined it. But when I blinked and looked again, it was still there, unmoving, staring directly at me. The waves crashed around it, but the figure didn't budge. My blood ran cold, and I turned back. I had to leave, but by the time I reached the street, the town was darker than it had been moments before. Something was wrong with this place, and I should have left then. The town itself was everything I thought I wanted. Quiet, isolated, peaceful, but in a way that made you feel like you were trapped in a still life. The streets were empty, the houses old and tightly packed together, each one seeming to watch the others. The sea was always in the distance, its deep blue stretching endlessly, but at night, it was different. At night, it wasn't peaceful. It felt like the ocean was alive, waiting, whispering. I could feel it in the air, the salt mixed with something older, something darker. It wasn't just the scent of the sea, it was something deeper, something that had seeped into the very bones of this place. The townspeople didn't make much noise. They went about their lives with a strange, unsettling quietness, always too polite, always just a bit too distant. They looked at me, eyes too full of something unspoken, and then looked away. It didn't take long for me to realize that no one really lived here. They just existed. There was no energy, no life in their movements, just an endless passing of time. I didn't understand it at first. The strange behavior, the way people would avoid looking at me for too long, the way the town seemed to stretch the hours of the day. Then, the first night I tried to sleep, the whispering began. It started faint, like a low hum coming from the sea. I thought it was the wind, the usual rhythm of the ocean, but it didn't feel natural. It felt like something was speaking just below the surface. Words I couldn't understand, but felt in my bones. I tried to push it out of my mind, but then time itself started to unravel. It was a late afternoon when I decided to leave the house. The air felt thick, as if the day had already reached its limit. But the moment I stepped outside, everything shifted. The light turned darker. I glanced at my phone. It was still 3 in the afternoon. Yet it felt like the world had gone from day to night in the blink of an eye. I looked around. The shadows were longer than they should have been. The town was dimming, the sunlight fading as if it was being sucked into the earth. But when I glanced up at the sky, there were no clouds. It was as if the sun had just disappeared. And when I tried to turn back to my house, the familiar streets now felt wrong. The walls seemed to close in, the air colder than it had been a moment ago. Panic set in, and that's when I saw the lifeless figures I'd noticed on the streets. There they were, standing by the water again. But this time, There was no calm in their eyes. No hesitation. They were standing in a line, motionless, all facing the same direction, staring out at the sea. I thought about running, but something kept me there, frozen. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself from watching. As the days passed, the strange occurrences didn't stop. In fact, they only got worse. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, feeling like something had crawled across my chest. I'd hear whispers in the house, soft voices just out of earshot, speaking in a language I didn't understand. But the real terror came one night when I decided to visit the cliffs that overlooked the sea. The moon was full, and the town below seemed too quiet, too still. I was standing at the edge, looking out at the water, when I saw them again. The figures standing on the beach. But now they weren't just standing. They were moving, slowly, steadily, toward the water. Their movements were unnatural, stiff. I felt a shiver run down my spine, and that's when I realized they were waiting for me. I ran back to my cabin, but when I closed the door behind me, the whispers returned, louder this time, urging me to come outside. I had to escape, I thought, but it was too late. My name is Lily, and I've always been someone who sought out peace in the chaos of the world. I had just ended a long relationship that had left me hollow, like I was walking through life with a piece of myself missing. I thought moving to this quiet coastal town would help me find a part of me that I had lost in the noise of the city. I needed to escape, to get away from the pressure of people who never understood me, the constant demands that seemed to weigh on my shoulders wherever I went. I imagined it would be easy. The idea of isolation, of having only the sound of waves crashing against the shore and the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind, was all I thought I needed. I wanted solitude, to clear my head, and I figured this little town would be perfect. The people seemed reserved enough, keeping to themselves. I had no expectations beyond that simple hope of space and quiet. But what I didn't realize, not at first, was that my search for peace was leading me straight into a trap that had been set long before I ever arrived. I was tired, emotionally drained from everything. The city had worn me down. The constant social pressures, the noise, the expectations. I thought a change of scenery would bring clarity. I didn't expect to find anything other than silence, maybe a little peace, maybe the chance to hear myself think again. I wasn't ready for the dark history this town hid beneath its quiet facade. The thing I was searching for wasn't peace at all. It was a place that had seen too much, and now I was part of its story. As I walked into the little house I had rented on the outskirts, I thought I was stepping into a dream. The kind of place people think of when they imagine running away to the coast. The walls were old, the wooden floors creaked as I moved through the rooms, but everything felt cozy, safe. But there was a tension I couldn't place, a small, nagging feeling that I tried to ignore. The first few nights were quiet, maybe too quiet. The kind of quiet where every little sound stands out, echoing in a room that feels too large and empty. I didn't think much of it at the time. I assumed it was just the change in environment, the newness of the place. But by the third day, things started to feel off. Subtle at first. Too subtle to really acknowledge, but enough to make me uneasy. I woke up early that morning, the light just beginning to filter through the blinds. The air had that stillness to it, a thick heaviness that seemed to settle in the corners of the room. The silence was so complete that I could hear my own breath, the rustling of the sheets as I moved, as though the house itself was holding its breath. As I made my way to the kitchen, I noticed something strange from the window. It was the beach. Normally, it stretched out in front of the house, wide and open, the sun reflecting off the water like a painting. But today, the shadows on the beach were different. They were longer than they should have been, stretching unnaturally across the sand. The sky was clear, the sun up high, so why did it feel like evening was already settling in? I shook my head, trying to dismiss it. It was probably just the angle of the sunlight, I thought. The shadows would shift once the day fully woke up, but there was something about the way they stretched across the sand, something that didn't sit right. I stared at it for a moment longer, but then I turned away and made myself a cup of coffee, trying to focus on something else. But as the day went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. There was a prickling at the back of my neck, a constant awareness that I wasn't alone in this place, even when I was in the house by myself. The air outside felt thick, heavier than it should have been. And the mum, and I stepped outside onto the porch. I felt it in my lungs. The breeze was stagnant, like it was carrying something old on its back. It was the strangest sensation, as if the world itself was waiting for something, watching. I decided to go for a walk, hoping it would clear my mind. I took the same route I had taken the first day, walking along the shore with the waves lapping at my feet. The town was quiet, far too quiet for a place that should have been filled with life. It was almost as if the sea was holding its breath too. The air smelled saltier than I remembered, almost with a hint of decay. I tried to tell myself it was just the sea, that strange smells were normal in such a place, but the feeling of being watched never left me. As I walked along the beach, I caught sight of something, a flicker at the corner of my eye. I spun around, but there was nothing. I wasn't sure what I had seen. Maybe it was just a shadow, a trick of the light, but for the rest of the walk, I felt my pulse quicken. There was no one on the beach, not a single soul. The town seemed like a ghost town, empty, waiting. I kept walking, even though every part of me screamed to turn around, to go back. By the time I returned to the house, I had convinced myself it was all in my head. I was just adjusting to the isolation, to the quiet. But that night, as I tried to settle into bed, the feeling grew stronger. The walls creaked, the house groaned like it was alive, but it wasn't the usual sounds of an old building settling. No, this felt different. It felt like the house was trying to tell me something. I pulled the covers tighter around me, willing myself to sleep, but sleep didn't come easily. The whispers in the walls, the strange noises, the shadows that lingered too long in the corners of the room, they all kept me awake. It was as if the town, the house, even the sea, was trying to pull me in. I couldn't escape the feeling that something was waiting, watching. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just lonely, that the isolation was getting to me. But the next morning, when I looked out the window, the beach was empty again, except for one thing, a figure standing at the water's edge. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. It was just standing there, staring out at the sea. And that in itself was enough to make my heart skip a beat. Because in all the time I had been here, in all the days that I had walked this beach, I had never seen anyone stand there. Not once. The figure was too far away for me to make out any details, but I could feel its gaze on me, as if it knew I was watching it. I turned away, my pulse pounding in my ears. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was nothing, that it was just someone else enjoying the view. But as the day went on, the unease I had felt on my first day began to grow again, this time stronger, more insistent. And that night, when the whispers came again, I knew it wasn't just the house. It wasn't just the town. The sea was alive, and it was waiting for me to realize the truth, that I was never meant to leave. It started like any other day. I had resolved to leave. I had to. The creeping unease, the strange events, each one a warning I couldn't ignore anymore. I packed my things quickly, throwing clothes into my suitcase, stuffing my few belongings into bags, all with a sense of urgency I couldn't quite explain. I was determined. I needed to get out of this place, this town, and away from whatever had begun to infect my mind. I stepped outside, hoping the crisp air of the morning would clear my thoughts, make me feel grounded again. The sun was bright, casting long shadows on the ground as I walked out onto the porch. The beach was in view, the water gently rolling in like it always did. For a moment, everything seemed normal again. But the second my feet hit the sand, something shifted, something I couldn't see, but I felt it in the very marrow of my bones. I looked up at the sky, and the sunlight dimmed, as if a shadow had fallen over the town. The warmth, once comforting, grew cold. The temperature dropped, but the world didn't seem to acknowledge it. The sun, which had been bright just moments before, now hung low and dull in the sky. A strange kind of twilight seemed to have settled over the beach, the sky shifting from blue to an eerie gray as the light vanished entirely. Before I could react, I felt it. The night had fallen. I blinked. It was the middle of the day, but the darkness was now all around me, thick and oppressive. The light no longer reached the ground. The sun seemed distant, unreachable. My heart began to race. The town was still, too still. The beach was empty, the air heavy with something I couldn't place. I turned quickly, retreating back toward the cabin, panic clawing at my throat. I needed to go. I had to leave now. But before I could even reach the door, I heard it. It wasn't the kind of laughter you'd expect from a place like this. No joy, no lighten. It was dark, hollow, distant. But it was there, echoing from the beach, stretching across the silence like a cruel joke. I froze in place, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up as I strained my ears, trying to make sense of it. The laughter grew louder, more frantic, and as I peered through the window toward the shore, I saw it. At first, there were just shadows on the sand, but then they appeared. Figures, dozens of them, all facing the water, standing perfectly still, like statues. Their movements were wrong, unnatural, stiff, jerky, like marionettes controlled by an invisible hand. I couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to run, to lock the door, to hide. But something kept me rooted to the spot. I watched, helpless, as the figures began to move, slowly, deliberately, toward the water. Their heads turned, and I caught a glimpse of their eyes, empty, lifeless, as though their souls had been drained away. They were walking in unison, their feet dragging along the sand as they made their way toward the waves, toward the deep, dark sea. I should have gone inside, locked the door, and never looked back. But something about it, something about the way they moved, the way they looked, held me in place. I couldn't look away, even though every instinct told me to. That night, I barely slept. Every noise, every creak of the house had me on edge. I heard whispers in the walls, in the corners of my room, in the cracks of the floorboards. At first, I tried to dismiss them, told myself it was just the wind, the house settling, the usual creaks and groans of an old building. But the more I listened, the more real they felt. They weren't the sounds of nature. No, these whispers were intentional, like a voice calling from somewhere deep beneath the earth. Calling to me. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself it was just my imagination. I had been under so much stress, lonely, anxious, overwhelmed by everything in my life. Maybe this was my mind playing tricks, but the whispers grew louder. I couldn't escape them. And then the dreams started. The same dream, over and over again. I would be standing at the edge of the water, staring out at the sea. The waves would crash relentlessly against the shore, and I'd feel a pull, something pulling me in. And standing there, just beyond the water's edge, were dark figures. Figures that looked like people, but not quite. Their faces were twisted, their bodies contorted. They would move slowly toward me, and I knew deep down that if I didn't run, they would take me. Every night, I would wake in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the whispers still echoing in my ears. I couldn't tell anyone. How could I? The town was small, and people here were kind, at least on the surface. They would think I was crazy, just another person who couldn't handle the isolation. And maybe that's what I was. But the longer I stayed, the more the strange occurrences began to feel like a trap, closing in around me until there was nowhere to run. One night, the whispers grew louder than ever. They were no longer faint, no longer easy to ignore. They were insistent, pressing in on me, pulling me toward the sea, toward the darkness that lay just beyond the shore. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I had to see what was going on. I rushed outside, desperate to escape the suffocating tension of the house, hoping the fresh air would clear my mind. But when I stepped onto the porch, I froze. The sky was clear, the moon casting an eerie glow over the beach. The air was cooler than usual, the kind of chill that made your skin prickle. But something was different. The sound of the sea seemed louder, more forceful, as if it was alive, pushing against the shore with a ferocity I hadn't heard before. I stood there for a moment, trying to steady my breath, but then, there it was again, the laughter. This time, it wasn't coming from the distance. It was closer, much closer, as if it was coming from Thats, the very sand beneath my feet. My pulse quickened, and I began to walk toward the beach, my body moving without my consent. And then I saw them, dozens of them. But this time, they weren't just standing by the water. No, they were moving, slowly, unnaturally toward the sea. Their heads tilted at odd angles, their arms reaching out like they were being pulled by something invisible, something I couldn't see but could feel in my gut. Their faces were empty, their eyes were gone, replaced with deep, dark holes. I could barely look at them, but I couldn't look away. They moved in perfect unison, like puppets on strings, walking steadily toward the waves. I could hear their footsteps in the sand, soft but deliberate. Every step felt like a hammer, driving into my chest. They weren't human anymore. Whatever they were, whatever they had been, they were now something else. I should have turned and ran. But the sea, it called to me, and I felt the pull, the desire to join them, the strange urge to walk into the water with them, to feel the waves crash over my body, to become one with them. But something stopped me. A small, rational part of my mind screamed, no. I had to escape. But before I could even move, I felt it. A sudden, sharp pain in my chest. A pressure, like something was pushing against my ribs, squeezing the air from my lungs. I gasped, stumbling back. And as I turned to flee, the laughter grew louder, surrounding me. It was no longer distant. It was inside me, in my ears, in my head. until I couldn't tell if I was hearing it from the figures on the shore or if it was coming from something deep inside me. I ran. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, back to the house, back to safety. But even as I slammed the door behind me, the laughter didn't stop. It followed me, like a shadow that refused to leave. And that's when I knew. This town, this place, wasn't what it seemed. There was something beneath the surface, something waiting for me to break, waiting for me to give in. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. The town had already claimed me. The sun had barely set when I saw them again. The figures from the beach. At first, I thought it was the shadows playing tricks on my eyes, a trick of the fading light. But when I stepped closer to the shore, I realized that this was no illusion. I felt the air grow heavier, the oppressive weight of it pressing down on me as if the earth itself was trying to suffocate me. The wind, which had been gentle just moments before, shifted. The salty scent turned rancid, thick with decay. The beach, once serene and peaceful, now felt like the edge of an abyss, like I was standing on the very boundary between two worlds. The figures, once stiff and lifeless, were now moving toward me, closer, more determined. They had changed. Their skin, once a pale shade of human flesh, had turned an unnatural, sickly gray, like corpses that had been pulled from the sea. Their eyes were hollow, dark voids that seemed to suck in the light. It was as if there was nothing behind them, no soul, no warmth, just an endless hunger that reached out from those blackened pits. One of them, a man, stepped forward from the others. He had the same sickly, decayed skin, but his expression was different. It wasn't the blank stare I'd seen earlier. He looked at me as if he knew me, his eyes narrowing, his lips curling into a twisted, unnerving smile. His mouth opened, and when he spoke, the words didn't just echo in the air. They felt like they were being dragged up from the depths of the ocean itself, heavy with the salt and the weight of the sea. "Join us." His voice was like a whisper of foam on the waves, low and guttural. It sent a chill down my spine, but I couldn't look away. His words were not a plea, not a request. They were a command. And in that moment, I understood. I understood why I had felt so drawn to the sea, why it had called to me since I arrived. It wasn't just a town by the water, the town we, as part of the sea, and the sea was not just a place, it was a force, a hunger. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest as I realized the truth. I was no longer just a visitor in this town. I was part of its story, part of its curse. I didn't just stumble upon this place by accident. I had been chosen, marked by something ancient and unforgiving that had been waiting for me. As I retreated, the man's twisted smile grew wider, his mouth opening impossibly wide as if to take me in whole. I backed away, my feet stumbling over the sand, but I couldn't run. Not yet. The ground felt like it was shifting beneath me, pulling me in. I looked around, trying to find some escape, some way to break free from this nightmare, but all I saw were the others, dozens of them, now moving toward the water, their dead eyes fixed on me, their movements jerky and unnatural. I couldn't move. I felt the weight of their gaze on me, as if they were drawing me into the depths with nothing but their hunger. The sun was gone now, the last remnants of daylight swallowed by the shadows. The sky had turned black, and the only light came from the eerie glow of the sea, the waves now crashing harder, as if to match the pounding of my heart. I turned around, desperate to find safety, and that's when I saw the house, My house. The place I had thought was my refuge. But it wasn't the same. It was as if the air around it had thickened, pressing against me, closing in. The house was now just another part of this world, this nightmare, a place where the past had left its mark in ways I couldn't yet understand. I ran back to the cabin, my breath ragged in my chest. And when I slammed the door behind me, I felt it, the change. The air inside was thick with something ancient and oppressive. The walls creaked, groaned, as if the house itself was alive, trying to expel me. I collapsed onto the floor, my cheeks, hands shaking, my mind racing as I tried to piece together what was happening. The town, the beach, the people. The town hadn't always been this way. It had been a town like any other, or so I had been told. The older generations spoke of a time when the place had been thriving, a bustling fishing community, but that was before the accidents, the disappearances. It started with the sea. The fishermen said it was the sea gods, angered by the town's greed. They had taken what wasn't theirs, and in return, they had cursed the town, bound its people to the ocean. And the curse wasn't just a story, it was real. The townspeople had sealed their fate that day when they performed a ritual to appease the gods, to pay back the lives they had taken. But something had gone wrong. The ritual hadn't ended it. It had bound them to the sea forever. The people here didn't live. They existed. They had been chosen, sacrificed to the ocean, but they never left. The sea demanded more every few decades, and I had been chosen. It was too late. I could feel it. I was already marked. I had stepped into their world, and now there was no escape. I was just another soul to be claimed. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as the realization hit me like a tidal wave. There was no escaping this. The sea had me. It was coming for me. I stumbled back to the window, my eyes scanning the beach below. The sky had darkened completely, the stars dimmed by the thick, swirling fog that had rolled in from the sea. But I could still see them. Them. The people from the beach, their twisted forms climbing from the water like the dead risen from their graves. They weren't just figures anymore. They were monsters, their bodies contorted, their skin stretched too tight across their bones. Their eyes were still hollow, black pits that swallowed the light, but now they moved with purpose, with malice. They were no longer walking in unison, like puppets pulled by strings. They were alive in a way that terrified me, alive with an unholy, consuming hunger. And then I saw him, the man from the beach, the one who had spoken to me. He was leading them, walking toward the cabin. His smile had twisted even more, spreading across his face like a grotesque mask. He didn't speak this time. He didn't need to. I could feel it, the pull, the need, the inevitable hunger that would consume me if I didn't act. The door rattled, and I heard the soft creak of wood splintering. The creatures were at the threshold, and the air in the cabin grew colder, thicker. I could hear them outside, clawing at the door, scratching at the windows. They weren't just trying to get in. They were trying to drag me out. I backed away, my body trembling with fear, but there was no way out. The walls, the windows, the door, they were all part of this curse. And when I turned back to the beach, I saw it. The water, which had once been peaceful, was now alive, its surface churning like something was moving beneath it. I could hear the whispers again, louder this time. I could hear them now. The creatures, the people, pounding against the door with their twisted hands, scratching at the windows with nails that had long since turned into claws. My heart raced as their haunting, guttural whispers filled the cabin. I knew it was only a matter of time before they broke through, before they dragged me into the darkness with them. But I couldn't just sit there, waiting for them to claim me. I had to act. There was no time to waste. The town wasn't just cursed, it was a trap, a place where the living and the dead existed side by side. The people who once called this place home were no longer just victims. They had become vessels for something far darker, something far older than I could comprehend. And now, I was one of them. The sea, with its ceaseless pull, had already taken hold of me. It had been waiting for me all along, pulling me deeper into its grip. But there was one thing, one final chance, one last hope. If I could destroy the altar hidden beneath the town, if I could destroy the very relic that had summoned the sea's wrath, maybe, just maybe, I could break the curse. I ran, my breath sharp in my chest, as I stumbled out of the cabin. The night air pressed down on me, suffocating, as I made my way toward the cliffs. The sea below roared louder than ever, as if it were warning me. The town was still, eerily so, but I could feel the presence of the creatures, their eyes following my every movement, their twisted forms lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to slip up, to falter. The altar was hidden beneath the old town church, long abandoned, its stained glass windows cracked, its doors hanging open like a mouth ready to swallow anything that dared to enter. I had heard rumors from the old folk when I first arrived, whispers about a relic, a forgotten relic that was said to hold the town's curse. They spoke of it like a legend, a myth that no one dared to speak of openly. But now, I knew it wasn't just a story. It was real. I reached the church, the ancient stone steps creaking beneath my feet as I descended into the damp darkness below. The air smelled of salt and decay, and I could hear the faint echoes of whispers, so faint I wasn't sure if they were real or if my mind was playing tricks on me. But I couldn't let that stop me. The altar was somewhere deep beneath the town, hidden in the dark belly of the earth. As I reached the depths of the church, I saw it. There, in the center of the room, was the altar. It was ancient, covered in moss and seaweed, the stone slick with the residue of years, maybe centuries, of neglect. The sea seemed to be reaching out for it, trying to pull it back into the depths as though it was still alive, still waiting to be fed. I could feel the presence of the sea, its hunger pressing against me, suffocating me. I approached the altar cautiously, my heart hammering in my chest. The sea's roar seemed to fill the room, vibrating through the very walls. It was as if the water itself was alive, watching me, waiting. I had one chance to break the curse, one chance to stop everything before it consumed me completely. But as I reached out to touch the altar, something happened, something I wasn't prepared for. I felt it, the connection. It was like a jolt of electricity running through my body, connecting me to the sea itself. I felt my blood turn cold as I realized the truth. I wasn't just a victim here. I wasn't just another soul to be claimed by the sea. My bloodline had been tied to the town's dark history. I wasn't the first to be brought here. My ancestors had come to this town long before me, seeking refuge, just like I had. But they had made the same mistake I had. They had ignored the curse, thinking it was just a story. But the sea had been waiting for me all along, waiting for me to complete the ritual. I wasn't just an outsider. I was part of the town's legacy. The sea had been calling to me, to my bloodline, for generations. I had been chosen, The sacrifice was meant to complete the ritual that had begun long ago. The sea wasn't just claiming me, it was claiming all of us. The creatures, the figures on the beach, they were all part of the price we had to pay. I was the final piece. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, and for a moment, I was paralyzed. I had no way out. I was part of the curse, part of the town's bloody history. I had come here looking for peace, but all I had found was a web of lies and darkness that had been woven long before my time. But I couldn't let it end like this. I couldn't just give in to the sea's hunger, to the creatures that were closing in on me. I had to fight. I turned to the altar, my hands trembling, and I saw it. The relic. It was a dark, twisted object, its surface carved with symbols I couldn't read, but I could feel its power. This was the source of the curse. The sea's wrath had been summoned through this very relic. If I destroyed it, if I could break its hold, I might just have a chance to stop the madness, to escape the fate that awaited me. But as I reached out to grab it, I heard the whispers again. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were voices, all around me, calling my name, pleading with me, demanding that I join them. I turned around, and there they were, the creatures, their eyes burning with hunger, their twisted forms slithering out from the shadows. They were closer now, their faces barely recognizable, their bodies too far gone to resemble anything human. They were nothing but vessels for the sea's dark will. They lunged at me, their hands reaching out to drag me into the darkness with them. I had one chance. I grabbed the relic, and with all the strength I could muster, I slammed it against the stone altar. The sound was deafening, a crack of thunder, like the earth itself was shattering. The air was filled with a blinding light, and I could feel the ground tremble beneath me. The sea roared in fury, its voice filling my mind, screaming in rage as the relic shattered into 1,000 pieces, its power dissipating into the air. The creatures screamed. The ground cracked open. The sea surged forward, rising up like an angry beast, trying to reclaim what it had lost. The town began to shake, the earth splitting apart as the sea rose higher, its waters crashing against the shore with a force I had never seen. The very ground beneath me trembled as if it was alive, struggling to keep the darkness at bay. But I had done it. I had broken the curse. The creatures, no, the people, began to collapse, their twisted forms crumbling like dust in the wind. The sea, its hunger finally sated, began to recede, pulling back into the depths from which it had come. I stood there, panting, covered in sweat, the weight of what I had just done settling into my bones. The town was no longer alive with its curse. It was silent, still. But there was one thing I couldn't shake. The sea might have retreated, but it was still out there, and it would never forget. As the earth settled, I turned away from the altar, and for the first time since I had arrived, I felt a sliver of relief. The town was no longer holding its breath. The curse had been broken. But as I looked out toward the horizon, I couldn't help but wonder, was it really over? I woke up, gasping for air, my body drenched in sweat. I didn't know how long I had been lying there, collapsed by the altar. But when I opened my eyes, everything was different. The first thing I noticed was the silence. It was absolute. There were no more whispers, no more cries, no more maddening laughter from the beach. It was like the world had exhaled for the first time in ages. I staggered to my feet, my legs weak, my mind still spinning from everything I had just experienced. The town was still, eerily so. The church that had once been a place of darkness now stood untouched, its door open, its ruins crumbled but quiet. I could no longer hear the thundering crash of the sea, nor could I feel the weight of the curse that had once hung over the town. The town was abandoned. The creatures were gone. It seemed like everything had been swept away, as though the earth itself had purged the town of its stain. But despite the stillness, something inside me knew it wasn't over. The sea, though it had receded, was still there, watching. I stood at the edge of the ruins, breathing in the clean, salt-heavy air. The ocean, which had once felt like an impenetrable force, now seemed distant, almost peaceful in its expanse. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe again, as if the suffocating grip of the town had finally loosened its hold on me. I took a step forward, then another, heading toward the cliffs. The town stretched out below me, its houses abandoned, its streets empty, silent. There was nothing left to hold me here. The curse had been broken. The altar had been destroyed. The sea had taken its last victim, or so I thought. I kept walking, my mind racing as the memories of everything I had just gone through replayed in my head. The twisted figures, the darkness of the sea, the horrors that had been hidden in this town for so long. I wanted to put it all behind me. I wanted to walk away and never look back. But the closer I got to the cliffs, the more I felt something. It wasn't the weight of the curse, not exactly. It was the weight of a presence, a watching, waiting presence. I couldn't explain it. It was as if the sea itself was still alive, still watching me, its gaze heavy and constant. I reached the cliffs, the wind picking up, howling through the jagged rocks that lined the shore. I stood at the edge, looking out at the vast expanse of the sea. For a moment, I felt like I was free. The town was gone, the creatures were gone, and the curse had been lifted. But there was a gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach, something I couldn't shake, a thought that kept creeping into my mind despite my best efforts to ignore it. I turned around one last time, hoping to see nothing but the empty town and the distant hills beyond. I wanted to leave it all behind, to forget everything that had happened here. But when I looked back toward the sea, I saw it. At first, it was just a ripple on the surface, something faint and subtle, like the last breath of a dying storm. But then it grew, spreading wider and deeper until the entire ocean seemed to shift. The water was dark, unnatural, its surface churning, swirling, and then, from beneath the waves, I saw them. At first, I thought they were just remnants of the sea's hunger, just the shadows of the creatures that had once walked the beach. But no, these shadows were different. They were darker, moving with purpose, rising from the depths like something had been waiting for them, waiting for the right moment. They formed shapes that I could almost recognize, but they were not human, not anything I had ever seen. They were distorted, like the sea itself was trying to pull them from the deepest, darkest corners of the ocean. I froze, my heart hammered in my chest, my breath catching in my throat as I stared at the shapes in the water. They were moving toward me, toward the shore, toward the land. The sea was not done with this place. The hunger was still there. It wasn't over. Not really. I took a step back, my legs unsteady beneath me, as I felt the cold chill of fear rise in my chest. The sea's hunger had not been satisfied. It had only been paused, as if waiting for something more. And in the depths of the water, beneath the waves, I knew the sea was waiting for its next victim. I turned away from the cliff, my body shaking as I stumbled back toward the town, my mind racing. The sea was far from finished. The curse hadn't been broken. It had merely been delayed. The shadows were rising again, and this time, they weren't just calling for the town. They were calling for me. I could feel it in my bones, the cold fingers of dread that crept down my spine, the knowledge that I had only just begun to uncover the horror that lay beneath the sea. The town had been its prison, but now it was free, and I had been the one to release it. As I walked back toward the ruins of the town, I could hear it again, the whispering, soft but insistent. The sea's voice, calling to me. It wasn't a plea, it was a command. It was patient, and I knew deep in my heart that the sea would not stop. It would not rest. It would keep coming, keep calling, until it had claimed what it was owed. And somewhere, deep beneath the waves, I knew the creatures, the things that had once been human, were waiting for the next soul to be drawn into their depths, waiting for me. I had broken the curse, or so I thought, but I had done something far worse. I had set it free. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more true horrors every week. If you've ever experienced something that you couldn't explain, I want to hear about it. Share your thoughts or your own eerie encounters in the comments below. And remember, the mystery doesn't stop here. Check out our next video for more spine-tingling stories that will keep you up at night. You won't want to miss what's coming next.